would apply, why would I need BCP, and which part of the security area will it come under? Would it come under security risk and management? Would it come under security operations? And how would I correlate both of them? And that's what is a great advantage now when you have eight domains instead of 10, which helps you understand and when you're at a particular junction that okay, I need to have a BCP, and you're running a SOC. Okay, that's where it clicks that the BCP part which you learned in your CISSP will actually help you understand your job better. That said, let's quickly jump into the domain one, which is the security and risk management. So this domain, talks about the cornerstone of information security concepts like the CIA triad, the authentication, authorization, accountabilities. What does it mean for you? And why is CIA, the confidentiality, integrity, and availability so important for you? Though these three things will keep appearing in almost every part of your information security domain. If you are into a governance, if you are into SOC, you are into application security or security or your application development as such, these all things will keep appearing again and again, and sometimes these are interchangeable as well. So it also talks about the least privileged topics. Who should have the privilege and who should not have. Why is the term least privilege used, and where it's optimum utilized. And then also this domain kind of talks on a very high level of the legal and regulatory issues, about the criminal law, the civil law, and the administrative law, and when a compromise happens, when there is a data breach happens, who is liable for that? Who takes the ownership and the brunt of the blame for what the compromise happened? So that's called liability. Due care and due diligence. Did I do enough to show that I have taken steps to make sure that my information or my customer information is secure? So why is there a due diligence and due care being given? And how do I protect my intellectual property rights and privacy and all those stuff? Then it also talks about, this domain also talks about the third parties. When a third party gets into contract with you, what all you should look for. How do I verify this vendor? What criteria should I use to evaluate that vendor, and to get a sense of comfort that yes, he is, when he handles my information, he's taking all the precautionary steps to keep my data confidential and without a compromise. And then this also talks about your information security governance. So this governance basically will be the policies, procedures, standards, and all those things. Do you have a mission statement for your own team? Do you have a policy charter? Do you have a standard which has been built, which tells you as to what needs to be done, or how a policy needs to be applied, or as an organization, if when a new security tool is implemented, what standard it should follow? And then it also tells you about the defensive categories, the control categories, whether it's preventive, detective, is it a corrective control, and what type of compensating controls do I have in place to safeguard myself. Then the most interesting part for this particular domain, talks about the risk analysis, which is understanding your assets, understanding your threats and vulnerabilities. How do I estimate my risk? How do I qualitatively and quantitatively estimate my risk? Do you have formulas for finding out that? That's the best part. If you know how to, if you have the habit of solving problems, this is an interesting piece for someone with that interest. So it allows you to, this particular risk analysis part allows you to give a dollar value to the risk, and then helps you understand or project as to the security measure which you're going to take is a valid security measure or not. Because if the cost of the product is lesser than the cost of security which you're providing, that's not an optimal business decision. Um, so that's how this risk analysis takes you to the end of this chapter 1, which is the security risk and management. Moving on, you have something called as asset management or asset security, to be precise. So, the first domain talks about asset security, but this domain takes you deeper into how you should secure your assets. Um, if I take an example of a SOC, and when a SOC is setting up, they need to try to understand what are my assets. If I have 5,000 servers, Windows servers, and 2,000, out of which 2,000 Unix servers, how much of these servers are actually handling customer data? Did anybody label it, or do I know which are the critical servers, which are customer or internet-facing servers, which I need to secure it, and what type of information do they host? Do they host credit card information? Does they process credit card information, and all such things? So when you have that kind of understanding, or when you classify the assets based on their labels and the activity which they do, then you'll have a sense of understanding that, okay, I need to secure these assets. Said that, who should do this activity? That's again is given by the ownership or the security roles. Who's the business owner? Is it my CISO or is somebody else? Who is my data owner? The person who actually is responsible for the data residing on my asset. Who is the actual system owner who maintains that particular asset? And who's the custodian or the users who kind of use the asset and use the information and the asset interchangeably, and then use this, process the data, and then provide whatever the business solution is. Um, this also this domain kind of touches upon how do I destroy the data. Most of you know that you already might be aware that you destroy the data, or take the hard drive or degauss it, or physically destroy it. But you have something called as SSDs. You have something called as a cloud storage, where you as a customer don't have the control on the cloud, or the physical storage which stores your data. How do you do that? So this area will probably acknowledge you, or will help you understand the areas where you have control, or the areas which you can not control, like the cloud, um, where this is not under your control. So and then it also talks about your data security controls. What are the certifications and accreditations? What are the standards and control frameworks you should put together? And how should you protect your data which is in rest or in transit, or is it, and or is it under processing, or it's been used now. So that's what the asset security domain will predominantly talk about. So okay, so moving
Before
on.
we move on,
Yeah.
and I can see Harish, Abhinav, Shiva, and Zubair. So can we have a quick intro in terms of what's your background? We can start with Zubair.
Hi everyone, I'm Zubair Chogle. I'm currently working as a sales engineer in algorithm-based auto Dubai. And my expectation from this session is basically, as we mentioned, part of the career plan is to have CISSP certified, and looking to get to know more about what the course is and how do we prepare for it, and also, if possible, go through the course as well, 5 day or weekend, whatever it might be. But yeah, that's why I'm more than 12 plus years of experience in the IT industry.
Great, thank you, Zubair. Shiva. Or Harish. Okay, looks like they're silent. So no issues. Let's go ahead, Kishore.
Sure, Ravi. Thank you, Zubair, for the intro and the background. Uh, Ravi, am I audible?
Yes, yes, you are.
Okay.
Yeah, I can see two more people, have joined us just now. Just looking at their names. Guys who have just joined, I can see Rajiv is one name. Can we have a quick intro before Kishore moves on to the next chapter? Between Rajiv, Shiva, Harish. I think Lokesh is another name I'm seeing. Quick intro, just a background in terms of, the kind of companies that you've worked for and what really interests you on the CISSP certification piece. Okay, I can just hear silence. So go ahead, Kishore. Please go ahead.
Okay. Sure. Okay. So let's talk about the chapter 3, which is the security engineering. Security engineering, basically talks about how do I secure my system, information processing system. It can be an operating system, it can be an application, it can be any other area where my information is getting processed. So the initial topic which you'll go through is the security models. These models basically are built upon the army regulations. So the US Army was predominantly the ones who started off these things, saying that I want to secure my data. I don't want people to the lower level guys to have little more access to that. So these things talk about different security models which get implemented. Some of them are called the Bella Padula, lattice-based access controls, integrity models, reading down and writing up models kind of stuff. So these basically talk about how can somebody get access to some confidential data, or how they can be denied from accessing some data. The other thing which talks about is the secure system design. How do I design my system which will process the information? How do I layer it out? What is the ring model which is called? Where it's basically the onion which I'm talking about. So you have the core components in the middle, and you have layers and layers of layers around it. So the rings which kind of come closer to the center of the information where it gets processed. How different rings interact with each other. Why do I have ring? What is the critical ring here? What is the outer ring do? And all those stuff, is kind of spoken out in this particular subset. The other thing which also comes across is the securing your hardware architecture. Your CPU, your memory protections, your data execution prevention, where your addresses get processed out, and what happens in a hardware environment, how the data flows between the CPU and the memory, what type of attacks can happen, why it's built such a way, all those stuff. The other thing which kind of comes up, something new, is the virtualization and distributed computing. So they will talk about what is virtualization. You have hypervisor, you have a type 1 hypervisor, type 2 hypervisor. What are these hypervisors as such? Then what is cloud computing as such? This is getting really big in the market, that everyone goes to the cloud. What is it that everyone goes to the cloud? What does it do? What really happens in a cloud? There are so many moving parts to the cloud that you cannot control. So what do you need to know about cloud computing? What do you need to know about grid computing as such? So some of things which will be under virtualization and distributed computing. Then you will also talk about system vulnerabilities, threats and countermeasures. What is a piece of a malware? what does a backdoor do, what is a client-side attack, what is a server-side attack, the latest one, what is the mobile device attacks, Android APK is getting attacked, your web applications getting attacked, or your websites get defaced, or your database gets breached, and what type of attacks are those, when it's specific to database or for web applications as such. Then this, as I said earlier, there were earlier 10 domains, now it's 8. There are some domains which got clubbed together to provide more sense of alignment as to what you need to know. So this domain, the security engineering, specifically talks about cryptography, though it's a very interesting topic. The reason I say that is the way you'll really know how a cryptography or a particular protocol works in. People are saying that symmetric and asymmetric key, and the key gets exchanged, but how does the key gets exchanged? Diffie-Hellman algorithm is used, but how does the Diffie-Hellman algorithm work? And why a hash is being used? Why a asymmetric key is being used? Can I use asymmetric key with a what type of attacks can happen on a cryptographic protocol when somebody has encrypted the data, or cryptographically encrypted the data? So what attacks can happen on that? And how do you implement cryptography as such? So you have the keys, asymmetric, symmetric, and the hashing algorithms. Then you have the attacks happening, and then it also talks about implementation of cryptography. So you have something called as digital signatures. You use IPsec, you use public key infrastructure, you use SSL and TLS, which will all talk about how do you secure information, whether it's in transit, whether it's in data at rest, or data in motion, or data or under processing as such, or data is in use. Then, interestingly, this also talks about your physical security. So you might ask, why physical security? Why cryptography clubbed into security engineering? So now you understand, you build a secure system, which is your information processing engine, or a piece of application, or a piece of hardware. Then you design that hardware to keep it secure. Then you cryptographically encrypt the data to keep it secure. But if you do not secure it physically, all this control fails. Though they get access to the physical device, though they'll take time to encrypt or decrypt the data, but they have got access to your physical devices which hold your sensitive data. So the physical security becomes important. And this physical security topic talks about your fences, CCTVs, your gates, and your smart cards, magnetic cards, your biometric cards, what type of which is more advantageous as such, and what do you call as a trapdoor, how tall your wall should be, what is your length of the fence should be, if you have lights, the perimeter lights, how tall they should be, what's the candle length, and what should be the throw for them, and all those stuff will get spoken in this. So that's something which is very interesting. Along with the final piece which you'll get to know is the fire extinguishing, the environment control, the HVAC, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning as such. So, so as an example, you have your fire sensors or smoke detectors. So where should you should place these fire sensors or the smoke detectors? You have a data centers where almost every time the data center floor is not onto the exact floor, but it's raised, elevated floor around 1 or 2 feet in the air so that they can run the cabling through it. Should I have a smoke sensor and a fire detector there, or should I have 4 feet above the ground, or should I have one on the ceiling, or how should I have it? On what's the optimum place where I can place these sensors as such? So this domain gives you a lot of information in terms of how do you secure your infrastructure, your processing information, and then your physical assets as such. Okay, if you don't have any questions, let's move on to domain 4 or the chapter 4, communication and network security, which is, I think, for an instance, it will be most familiar and easier domain to come through. So this will talk about a lot of network architecture and design, your OSI models, your fundamentals of network concepts, your routers, switches, and all those stuff. Where you need to understand how a network gets established. What is a T1, T2, and all those connections? What is a chatty protocol, and all those protocols. So uh, your application layer protocols and the concepts, and the WAN technologies. Uh, what is RFIDs? What is wireless local network? How can you secure that? You might have heard that there's a what is the breaches can happen to your wireless local areas, and all those such things. This again will talk about the different devices which gets utilized in your communication and network security. Your repeaters, hubs, switches, firewalls, modems. So probably you should be aware that now when you talk about firewalls, it's not just the firewalls which we speak about. We also will speak about your UTMs, which is the unified threat models, or modules which almost every other vendor is started utilizing. You have FortiGates, you have checkpoints, you have your McAfee's, or Sonic Wall, and all other vendors now are jumping onto the UTM wagon. That's again something which you need to understand and understand in a sense that how it gets pulled into a lot of other configuration items. This domain will also talk about how do you communicate securely. What is your VPN? What is your remote access? What are your remote authentication protocols and their frameworks, like Kerberos and other things, and why it's so important for us to do all these things. So most of you would have known all these things, but when you put it to a perspective that why I use certain things in such a certain way in an organization, from a theoretical standpoint, everything will make sense, but I would request everyone to put all these scenarios into your real-time understanding. If you walk through a corridor and if you see a fire extinguisher, you should ask yourself, what type of fire extinguisher is that? Similarly, if somebody is saying that you're encrypting your emails, why am I doing it? What encryption protocol is being used? What device, what tool am I using it to encrypt my emails and as such? Why is SSL being used? What type of authentication protocols do I use? How it works. So that better explains and it'll help you understand a threat or a risk for you, so that you can explain it better to your senior management as such. Moving on to domain 5, which is your identity and access management. Basically talks about controlling access and managing your identities. So which is called the IAM or IDM, something like that, as the industry says. So this domain used to be the very first or second domain when I did my CISSP certification. So that was interesting for me to straight away go into your access controls and talk about role-based access control, rule-based access control, RBAC, mandatory access controls, your discretionary access controls. What is authentication methods? Your two-factor authentications, your three-factor authentications, your biometric, your retina scans, and all those stuff comes under the identity and access management. So two-factor authentication, if people know that Google has introduced the two-factor authentication, so I use it. I'm sure most of you might be using it. Why Google suddenly came into the picture of two-factor authentication? HSBC Bank uses two-factor authentication. Their internet banking users get this token, RSA token, handed over to them to access their account. It was when I was working with HSBC, like 2004, 2005, 2006, I got RSA token then for my internet banking account. So they were then using the two-factor authentication, your password and the token which you use. So you might ask a question, how does the token work? How does the system on the other end knows what token number is generated? That's something for us to kind of know and understand why such a thing is being utilized. This also talks about access control technologies. Your central access control, your single sign-ons, your identity as a service, your LDAP, and how do you review your access? What is the privilege or, or access creep, somebody might call, and how can I avoid this? As a prime example, when we were at the bank, we used to do something called as recertification. So all the users used to go this recertification process. This one team used to do the entire recertification process of understanding the user's access and going back and sending emails to their managers to understand whether this particular user needs this access still. Because the access creep, which is called, when you move on from one department to the other department, and you still have the access to the old tools and access to the data, then you're basically doing the access creep, because you're gradually gaining more and more access for multiple areas which is the concept comes into least privilege. You should not you should not be aware, or you should not have access to those areas. And how can you identify that with this access certifications, recertifications, and what process you should do? How do you identify that? How do you automate that? And all those things will probably understand and try to do in this identity and access management. I'll stop here for a minute. I'll go back and ask if anybody has any questions so far.
Kishore, I have Atul actually has a question. His question is, do I need to have prior working experience of IT security components like firewall, IPS, IDS, etc.? Or can I take up CISSP training without prior hands-on experience? Will this matter?
You should have experience or knowledge about all these things, prior, because the problem or the hurdle which you'll come across is, how do you correlate the firewall, IDS, IPS with the other things, with other parts of the security, because when you say asset security, when you say communication and networking, how do you set it up? Why it's important, where you should place your IDS, IPS, what type of firewall rules you should have, what ACLs you should come across. So if you're not aware of this, for you to understand the concept and get familiar and get a grip of it would be a little difficult, though it's not impossible, but it'll take some time for you. So a funny example, I had difficulty in understanding what's the difference between a router and a switch. So I was like, breaking my head over that. So I had to basically go to look at a video and understand. But since I never worked on that, I never handled that particularly, so it was difficult for me to theoretically understand in my head as to what a switch does and what a router does. Only reading will help you to an extent, but really understanding and going and doing this stuff will be able to help you a little more, getting a good understanding of, a real-time understanding of what all these components will help you in this CISSP as such.
Great, thanks for that, Kishore. Anyone else having any questions, feel free to ask now, or we can actually move forward, Kishore.
Okay.
Sure, I have a question. Do you want me to type on the chat or ask?
Go ahead, Zubair. Go ahead.
Yeah, so my question is around the prerequisites, wherein you said either 5 years or 3 years experience and all of that. So how do you, so in any of the two domains, the first criteria, now I've got, let's say, 12 years of IT experience in security and the enterprise side, storage security. So what do you need to do to prove that you have 5 years necessary experience or whatever in 2 or more domains? Like, I know it comes after the certification wherein you submit this, but what is the validation?
The validation only will be by the actual person who can validate your resume, where you put your experience, and and he sends it across to ISC². So if he is able to validate your experience in these two domains, and he understands that, okay, you write that my experience for this particular year is for this domain, and and he vouches for you, that's how it will get validated.
Who nominates this third person?
He should be already a CISSP, like myself or somebody who's working with you, or whom you are aware of in your circle, that he's a CISSP, and he can endorse you, So what happens is you'll provide him your resume with all the valid information, with editing to your resume that, you know, precisely marking the domains. So he'll take the resume, endorse it, send it back from his communication address to IISc Square, validating that he vouches for you, that he understands and validates your experience in those domains, and you should be awarded the certification.
And how many such validations you need? One or?
Only one. Only one. Only one CISSP should be able to validate you.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. So Abhinav, I think you have a question. So you have been working in IT security, for me CISSP. So which part of IT security you're working? You know, would it be the app security, or pen testing VA, or security operations, or governance, or risk?
That's Atul, Kishore. That's Atul typing.
Oh, okay. So you have firewall, IDS, IPS. So I think CISSP should be able to give you a better recognition, because CISM talks about how do you manage your information systems, you know, all the governance and all those things. But CISSP overall will give you a very high level overview of what you should be focusing on, because there is technology, there is governance, there is app security and all those stuff. So when you talk about firewall, IDS, IPS, those are from a management standpoint. You manage those devices. But if you are aware of how do you manage those devices, probably you'll be good at security engineering or security operations, where you understand how a firewall logs comes in, or how does it process the data, and how should I interpret a threat. Because IPS and IDS does the same thing. You know, it basically takes traffic and then, you know, puts it across through a signature, and, you know, generates a signature and says, okay, this type of activity is happening. If you're able to write rules into IDS IPS and then understand how an IDS IPS works, more or less towards that side, you will be opt for a security operations role, where you're setting up operations, where you're integrating your IDS IPS firewalls to your SIEM solutions. You know, you're making sure that the entire logs are coming in an optimized parsed manner. You'll be able to configure your SIM, your onboard your logs onto your SIM, and you know, and then help the organization build that rules and queries and everything else. So I think CISSP should be the right certification for you, unless you have your career goal saying that I want to get into the certified information security manager kind of role, where I'm managing a security based team, and, you know, I should do all these things. Sure.
Great. I see Vinit and Lokesh just joined us. Guys, can we have a quick intro before we move ahead?
Hi Ravi, this is Vinit.
Hi.
I'm working for HSBC as a process executive.
Great.
As a reconciliation. Yeah. Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you, Vinit. Lokesh, yeah, go ahead.
Hi Ravi, this is Lokesh. I work for HSBC as well. I'm into IT security, mostly covering to risk department.
Great to have you, Lokesh and Vinit. Let's go ahead, Kishore.
Okay, great. So let's move on to this chapter 5, or the domain. Okay, we just finished the domain 5. Let's move on to the chapter 6, which is the security assessment and testing. When you say security assessment and testing, this can be done on multiple facets. You can do your pen testing, which is again to understand the strength of your network. You know, whether somebody can breach into your network and, you know, access confidential or sensitive areas. Though almost every other person now is able to do pen tests, given the ease of access with Kali Linux, with the tool Metasploit, and with Nmap being very user friendly, you just have excellent tutorials to understand and do pen testing. That said, what is the right way of doing pen test? How do you document that? How do you conduct this pen testing? Whether do you know full knowledge of the network, or do you partial knowledge of it, or you do white hat, black hat, or whatever that kind of types of pen testing is what we'll talk about in this domain as such. We'll also talk about vulnerability testing, which is this application penetration testing, again, in application security vulnerability testing. So this will be done on the web applications, which is hosted. So most of the organization, or I think almost every other organization, have some or the other application which is accessible by the internet. You take your HR applications, you take your finance applications, you take your ticketing tool, or your SIM as such in some areas is accessible, via internet. The organization where I work now is in the same line. I can access my application remotely as such, just that I need a login password and a token as such to access that. So when you have an application hosted on the web, and you have a web server hosting that, and that becomes critical for you to understand how secure your application is. Can it break with the number of incoming connections, or somebody can easily exploit a vulnerability? What is the most biggest gap you have, or the biggest vulnerability you have to your web application at the right moment? So vulnerability assessment is again one thing. So you need to understand the log reviews, the security audits, the security assessments. How do you conduct your security assessments? What do you need to do? How do you need to process, understand and process it out, and all those stuff. The other important thing when I say about the log reviews is for you to understand what your log says. So sometimes this also can be put across, saying that your output validation, or input validation, input sanitization, output validation. What is your web server saying? If you're accessing a web application, and if you're able to understand what web server runs in the background, and if you're trying to exploit that, what kind of messages that does throw out, and how does a hacker or an attacker understands what would be his next step. So and then when a security practitioner looks at the logs after a pen test or a vulnerability testing has been done, what does he find out? Does it mean that the SOC team will take these logs and write rules for that, or is it the understanding, or the tester can identify that there is something wrong from the logs which needs to be corrected, or the misconfiguration is there, or what happens in there? Okay. The other piece which also kind of gives you an understanding is the software testing methods. How do you do that? You do static or dynamic testing. You do software testing levels, fuzzing. How do you test coverage analysis? How do you do interface testing? So all those other different type of software testing methodologies needs to be utilized. So basically, I would put across saying a QA's job, quality assurance job, whether they'll test the code against a set of policies and set of rules, and saying that, okay, now tell me what does happens. What does the tool say? Whether the application is working fine, or this particular module is not be able to produce the right amount of information, or there is something wrong with the code itself. So that's more or less about your security assessment and testing. Okay, moving on to the domain 7, which is the security operations, my favorite part. So security operations as such, we'll talk about administrative security, personal security. When you say personal security, what do you mean? You have some sensitive areas in your office, like the HR bay, or HR room, or a server room, which you'll not have access to straightforward. Only a certain handful of people will have access to. How do you do that? Who are these personnel who should access it? Whether you use your discretion to do that, or you have a set of guidelines to do that, and how do you define that? This also talks about your forensics, your forensic analysis, your network analysis, your e-discovery of basically electronic discovery of data on the drives, or embedded device forensics as such. So forensics will have a lot of things. We'll also talk about chain of custody. How do you prove a case against a particular person in the court of law? The chain of custody comes into your help. How do you manage that and all that stuff. The other thing which also comes into play is the incident response, which is the key thing here. What's your incident response methodology? When you say incident response methodology, how do you triage an incident? How do you come up to a root cause analysis? How do you identify a routine and a non-routine incident? What do you call a routine and non-routine incidents? You call a phishing as a non-routine incident, or a spearfish as a non-routine or a routine incident. So that's something which we will understand from the incident response process. Then you'll also talk about your preventive and detective controls. These can be your IDS IPSs, your SIEM, your DLP, your endpoint security. So all these areas will come under your preventive, because most of them will stop an attack or log an attack, or alert the security practitioner to, or the SOC personnel to understand, take action against. This will also help you understand your asset management. When I say asset management, this is purely understanding your asset configuration management, your change management. The reason you see that asset management in here is, let's take an example of you see a user getting created, on your Active Directory or on particular server. Why does this happen? How a person can create an account. You'll validate and go and understand whether this is a valid user or not. Then you'll understand if there was a policy or a configuration or a change management done on that particular server. If there was, and it was not done by an authorized user, you'll need to take an action, which becomes your practically to handle. So then your investigation process starts, or incident response process starts. Who did this? From where it happened? How is he able to do it? What changes he made? What other devices did he access? And the other stuff, which is more of an investigative in nature. And that's what it's key for you to understand and log all this change management and configuration management information into your SIEM or log management solution. Then the other thing comes into play as the continuity of operations. You might ask, why continuity of operations into a SOC area? The reason can be that you are heading a security operations or running a security operations, which basically looks at all the threats coming in towards your organization, internal or external as such. If, for suppose, there is a natural disaster and it stops you from conducting your operations. Let's take a prime example of Chennai. So your operations runs in US, you are in Chennai, floods happen, your entire office is shut down, your SOC operations sitting out of Chennai is gone. It's non-operative. So for those days where you will not have any connectivity, what's your backup contingency plan? Who are those personnel who's looking into your logs or the alerts which comes into play, and handles an escalation or handles an incident as such? So that's the reason the DCP and DR comes of very importance in the security operations centers. So this particular continuity of operations will talk about your BCP and DR. How do you develop a BCP DR plan? How do you conduct your BCP DR testing? Is it tabletop testing or a full-blown testing? How do you choose a site, whether it's a hot site or a warm site or a cold site, or you have a reciprocal agreement between two companies where you can go and work for them and in their location, and how do you conduct your business impact analysis? So when you say business impact analysis, this will also talk about what key parts of the business are what are the key parts of the business. If that part of the business or that application is not up and running in certain period of time, you lose X amount of dollars. And if it's not running for X plus amount of hours, for 24 hours plus, you basically, and based on that judgment or business impact analysis, you will take your call as to where do my operations run, how much of an effort should I put, how much amount of dollars should I spend on making sure that I have a contingency plan ready. So those are the areas which more or less you'll try to talk about in the security operations domain.
So Kishore,
before I
yeah, sorry.
Yes.
I think if you're referring to Atul's question, I think if that can be answered, nothing like it.
Yeah. So it says 3 days of cloud compute. These days of cloud,
No.
IaaS, PaaS, hybrid cloud is a major part of the enterprise information. How updated is it? Yes, the cloud computing is one of the parts for your asset security, or I think security engineering, I believe. Though you have a complete different certification for cloud as such, which is called the CCSP, Cloud Certified Security Professional, which talks in depth, in very detail about cloud computing, IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS, or private and hybrid cloud models as such. So the CISSP will talk about a part of the cloud, or not entirely talking about cloud. So it will be cloud computing would be part of the overall domain, but not in specific to cloud security. So for you to do that, I think CCSP will make a lot of sense. Hope that answers your question. Okay. Great. Anybody else has any questions? Okay. So I'll take this as no, and then let's move on to the domain 8 or the chapter 8, the software development security. The software development security is again based on your how do you develop an application. How do you securely develop an application? More or less, I mentioned that you should have the output sanitization, input validation as one of the key features for you to develop at. Now there are multiple levels, multiple models which will help you to develop an application very securely. There are code reviews, which will review the code almost instantaneously and tell you which piece of the code or which part of the code is not securely written. And how do you, so that means you are basically building security from the right moment or the very beginning of the coding itself. And that's what we need today to understand and take it forward, because you cannot build an application and then do the security review or code review and then try to fix the bugs when it goes into production. That will be a time consuming effort, and it's not the optimum way for you to develop an application. So this topic will familiarize you with the programming concepts of what is a machine code, what is a source code, what are interpreters, what is compilers, and all those stuff. So the other thing it will talk about is your application development methods. Everybody is aware of the waterfall method, the agile methodology, the system development lifecycle, the rapid application development, the code repository securities, where you'll keep your code securely, whether you'll go to an escrow organization to keep your code secure, so that nobody gets the full version of the code, or nobody is able to get hold of the code, so that there is an internal or disgruntled employee stealing your code and walking away with that. So how do you build auditing into your own application when a particular module changes, or when a particular software component changes? How do you audit it? How do you record it, so that the SOC team or the developer will know from the audit logs as to what has gone wrong, so that he'll understand, okay, this is what gone wrong, and he's able to fix that the application within no time. So when you talk about applications, you'll also talk about databases. Everybody knows a database. Everybody knows SQL, MySQL, MongoDB, or which is coming up to the market. which is I think getting a lot of attention now. This ancient technology like SQL, MySQL, and all other Oracle as such databases, which is still operational and most of the organizations use. So how do you understand a database if you don't are familiar with it, database concepts? So this domain will help you understand the depths of database. You call it as a relational database, you call it as a database views, hierarchical database, your database integrity, what is replication, what is shadowing, and all those stuff. And also helps the security operations team or person who are into security operations help a bit of understanding as to how database runs, what type of auditing can happen in a database, what type of logs he should be aware of, should get into your SIEM to work on. So this is a little helpful for those guys, and for you to understand if a database is there, how should I maintain the security of it, and who should access it, what type of commands can be run on that. If a command is run, how do I know whether it's something is used to extract information, or is it somebody who's trying to extract information or trying to push some information into the database. This moving on, apart from the database, I think you'll also talk about your object-oriented programming, the C++ concepts and object request brokers and those stuff. Though I myself is like not a huge programmer as such, but it'll be a very good eye opener for people who are not from a development background or a coding background. So the other thing at the end of the domain you'll also know about is how do you assess the effectiveness of software security. So you have your software capability maturity model. Then you understand your software vulnerabilities. How do you understand acceptance testing for that? How do you test your commercially off-the-shelf software, which is the COSS and custom developed or the internally developed applications, or the OS concepts as to when you're developing an application, what all security concepts from the OS, top 10 vulnerabilities you should be aware of, and how you should be worried about, how should you integrate that with your security testing and while developing as such. So that's what you'll understand and go through as part of the last domain, which is the software development security. So I think we have come up to the last of the domains. I'll take a pause here and then wanted to know if anybody has any questions before I go on. Okay. If that's the case, I think I'll take that as a no, and then I'll go forward with that.
Kishore, we got Sesha Prakash who's joined us. Yeah, Zubair, go ahead.
Yeah. My question is, from a practical experience perspective, not everyone will definitely have experience on these 8 domains. So what I understand is at the end of the day, it's basically you study and then you give the exam based on the domains that you are not experienced in. Right? For example, I have got no clue about software development, but maybe the controls around security around software development. So someone might not know what is replication all about from a database perspective, etc. What is the approach in those scenarios? I mean, is it only reading and then giving the exams based on reading, or because it will be a bit difficult, for someone who doesn't have experience in that area to understand the concepts?
Yeah, no, I completely understand where you're coming from. So I had that difficulty since I was purely from an SOC operations background, and when I took my exam, it was a little difficult for me to understand the security assessment, software development methodologies. But the important part here for us to understand is how do I put the perspective of what I learned from these unknown domains into practicality? How do I see that in the practical world? if I have a developer who I know, I can talk to him, or probably I'll take an example of how it gets implemented in the real-time organization. So that kind of research, as well as having a common discussions within your peer group and taking quizzes, will help you a maximum extent to understand and get familiar with these concepts. Because at the end of the day, you cannot go and just write developing a code, or be part of the teams. The only way, as I mentioned, you can do is by these three ways. You take real-time examples, you do quizzes, and you go and talk to your peer group in understanding how this particular concepts get implemented, or you do on your own, or you have somebody who can help you implement a database, or watch some videos which can help you understand the concepts in an example, in a practically example manner. So that's the reason I said in the very beginning is you need to put into perspective the practicality of what all we do here. The reason why a database gets assessed is for a certain reason. And if I understand in a practical manner, in a day-to-day areas which I come across with, is like internet banking. For example, internet banking. Internet banking uses database at the end. But why am I not able to go and update my residential address in my internet banking? It takes, even though I give my address, it takes at least 48 hours for it to get updated. So who does that? Why there is a control? All these things. These are practical things. So that's how I think you will be, or the person will be able to understand the practicality of it, and have a better understanding of it at the end of the day.
All right, thanks.
Sure.
Let's move forward. I think we're almost out of time.
Yeah. Quickly, I think most of you know that the CISSP exam format is now changing. It's now computer adaptive testing. The computer adaptive testing is something which will test or present you questions which are difficult. If you are answering them correctly, it will give you more tactical and difficult questions as you go forward. So that means you are no longer required to write your exam in 6 hours, but you can finish it in 3 hours. And it's no more 250, but it's 100 to 150 questions. So that's something which is good, but that's also challenging that you don't have an option to review your answers. If I'm right. And it's again multiple. Sorry, go ahead.
But it takes the confusion out.
Oh, yeah, I mean, like in a sense, it takes you confusion out. But again, people who have the benefit of writing for 6 hours, they can actually go and review these questions, And then if you are like 100% sure, you can go with that. If you are 80 to 90% sure, you hold on to that and then come back and review. But I think here, 100 to 150 questions is a short time, but I think you'll get to know the results pretty simple, pretty quickly. Though the CBTs one were the earlier ones where they were having the computer-based testing for 6 hours, but I think this is much better than sitting for 6 hours at doing the computer adaptive, because it tests your knowledge, and if you're able to answer difficult questions, it will present you more difficult and challenging questions. So so the reason why it's put it is to assess the true capacity or the capability of the candidate at the exam. Okay. So I think before this is the last slide for the day. The mindset of a CISSP or person who's reading the CISSP, as I said, you are a risk advisor. You'll only say that if you do not do this, this is the effect which will be on our organization or on that particular incident, and this is what the optimum way of doing it. And that's where the decision will come. So because you are as a risk advisor, will go and tell the senior management that this is what we should do, and this is what the impact will be, and this is what the cost will be, and this is what the advantages will be. We'll validate the advantages with the disadvantages, and then we'll take a call for that. You are not you do not fix problems. So here the CISSP is not about fixing a problem. So you are trying to understand what the problem is, trying to find out how do I better find a solution for a problem, but not fix the problem as such, because there is a problem with an encryption, there is a problem with a particular protocol or a particular policy. You're trying to go around and trying to say that what's the optimum way of I implementing this, rather than saying that this is completely this is a problem, I need to fix that. So who is responsible for security? Everyone is. Every person in the organization is responsible for the security. You as an individual will be responsible for your own security, your own information out there on the internet, on social media, or anywhere else out there, where you think the information should be restricted from others to be accessed. How much security is enough? That's a question which cannot be answered. You can only answer that by try your best to secure everything. When you say best, there will be something which is called a residual risk, or which is the risk which still remains out there, for which you cannot do, like a natural calamity, which you cannot do anything for that. All decision starts with risk management. Risk management starts with identifying, evaluating your assets. As I said, you identify what your assets are, which is important, what is more critical for me, which of the assets run my business critical applications, whether it's a cloud or whether it's on-prem. Understand that and then start securing that. Incorporate security into design as opposed to adding it later. As I mentioned, you need to add your security components. You need to test your code. You need to build your code right from the very first stance itself. You cannot go back and secure your code later once everything is developed, because once you try to do that, there are other components which get screwed up or get what you call have issues once you try to fix small silos of code, and that's a bigger challenge for us. And the last thing is layer defense, something called as defense in depth. So you have your layers. Now that everybody knows that the prime minister is the key point, and you have layers and layers and layers defense of personal securing him at odd point. There are person who's very close to him who can go and touch him. There are person who can go do not touch him, they cannot talk to him. And similarly, where your data gets processed, you have some or trusted applications or trusted devices which can go and directly talk to it. There are some non-trusted devices which can go in the perimeter, and they can take this information from it and then hand it over to the processes which can work on it. And that's what is called defense in depth or layer defense. So I think that's how your mindset should be. And for all these things, always have a practical approach of how these concepts are getting implemented in real time. So yeah, so that's from my end. Thank you everyone for listening in today, listening to me. It was great presenting about CISSP, and I hope you all the best.
Thank you so much, Kishore.
Ravi?
I think, yeah, thank you so much, Kishore. Yeah. Go ahead, Zubair.
So Kishore, what do you recommend? I mean, it's a great overview. Thank you for the presentation. What do you recommend? I was from a certification perspective, that definitely, I'm planning to go for attend a course and then the certification, of course, because one of the things I'm also looking at is probably some mentors who you think would be good in delivering the right course content in preparation for this for the exam. Do you have any of those in mind, or do you suggest centers? I tried in Dubai. There's no availability next year, so I'm looking at.
Zubair, can you repeat your question? You are getting muffled in the middle.
Okay, I know what I was saying is from as the next steps. I'm looking at enrolling for a course before giving the exam. So, do you have any recommendations or best practices? With around the exam itself, or any recommendations for centers who give who are well certified to deliver this course for like 5-day or weekend, whatever it could be?
From taking an exam perspective, I request you to take multiple books. Read the same topic from multiple places. So the reason why I'm saying this is, if you stick to one book, the concept is explained in a different manner. When we read from multiple books, the concepts become much easier for you to understand, because the way they explain it is in a simple English. Sometimes it's complex English, and sometimes simple English, and they'll give you examples with it, and that's how you'll understand your concepts, clubbed with your understanding of how do you take the quizzes, because quiz always will help you understand and assess yourself, how far have you understood a concept. So trust me, I never took any classes from any places. It was pure my own study, which I did for quite some time, and then I took this exam. But I've seen people who did it on their own. So you don't need, you need that peer group to talk about. But I think referring to multiple books, referring the same concept over multiple books will help you understand the concept much better. And there are some places there are some online sites which will allow you to take your exam or take the quizzes. So if you like, there is a site called CCQ, I think, which will, I think the fees is around $60 odd for a month, where you get unlimited quiz, for entire domains. So you read through that, and in the last 1 month, sorry?
What is the website you just mentioned? Sorry.
Oh, I'll put that in the chat. Let me do that.
Okay, all right.
So CCQ is a site which, I did it when when I did my CISSP. I enrolled for that, and then I took the quizzes repetitively. The only way you can understand and get better at a concept is get repetitively, do the same thing over and over again, so that your doubts and your doubts in your head will get cleared by doing the same over and over again. You read the same concept in multiple places, taking the exam and talking to the peer group, where they will help you understand the concepts. I think that will be much better for you to clear that will be a better way of you to clear the exam, and having the confidence in going through the exam.
Okay, thanks, Kishore.
Sure.
Great. Thanks so much, Kishore, for your wonderful insights. It was, I think, a great session. I think we just have one more question from Atul. He's asking, after CISSP certification, how does my career path looks, or what is the next step for me in terms of my growth plan?
See, it's CISSP is like the master of all domains. You went through the the multiple domains which we talked about. So all these domains. So if you are in a particular path into information security as such, and you want to say that, okay, I do my CISSP, that means the organization will recognize you as a credible and knowledgeable security professional, and then that knowledge, that accreditation or certification can be taken into progressing into your organization. You do some stuffs and you implement some stuffs, and then or you are trying to jump to a different organization. I think that's how it will help you in terms of your career growth. So because everyone looks for a CISSP, so to get your resume shortlisted in the market out there, CISSP will help you. Again, where do you want to place yourself in the IT security tree is up to you. You want to go into security assessment, you want to go to security operations, you want to go into development, or where do you want to see? You want to see in the governance and risk is what. But CISSP will let you go into that domain, help you into that. But after that, I think it's your own experience which will take you further from there.
Great. Thank you, Kishore. So before we end, a couple of announcements from Sai Equity, specifically answering to Zubair's question. He's actually looking at some kind of an institute within Dubai who can actually guide him so that he can get certified on CISSP. So Zubair, the good news is Kishore has agreed to do a crash course virtually. So we actually have a learning schedule which is spread across 8 weeks, completely 32 hours, 4 hours every Saturday is what we're looking at starting next December. 2nd December. The pattern will be that each domain will be for 4 hours. Kishore would actually recommend a schedule every week in terms of what to read, what are the resources online which you can actually use. And the next Saturday when he starts with the other domain, he's going to start with an assessment before moving ahead. So that's the kind of pattern. You can look at it for the next 8 weeks starting 2nd December. And you'll have an experienced an IT professional guiding you through the next 2 months before you can actually give the certification as such. So that said, we basically want to thank you so much, Kishore, on behalf of CISSP, and I really want to thank everyone who has joined us today. Let me quickly take the names. Achyut, I think this went very smooth, so thanks so much for that. Scheduling, Lokesh, Sesha Prasad, we can see you there. If you want to ask or intro yourself, it'll be great. Thank you, Vinit, for joining in, and Zubair as well. So we'll close in another minute or so. Anyone else has any questions, you can directly ask Kishore.
I'm good. Thanks, Kishore.
Yes, I joined a bit late due to network issues. So I just wanted to know if you can give me a minute on how the new examination would be.
Sure, Shesha Prakash. So the new format is, as I showed here, it's a computer adaptive testing. So how it happens is you will try to answer a question based on your response, whether it's right or wrong. You'll be presented the next question. So thereby probing your understanding of a concept. It can be randomly picked up, or it can be security operations. It can be testing, or it can be security assessment, or risk management as such. So the more, as you start answering questions in a correct pattern, you'll be asked more intriguing and more diverse questions as such. So thereby, it's in real time. It's trying to judge your knowledge. So as I said, up to 3 hours, you can finish the exam much quicker as well, or you can take up to 3 hours, and you can answer 150 questions as such, or you can answer 100 questions. Again, that based upon how you answer the questions and what type of questions.
Does it mean that the more complex questions will get a higher rating or a higher mark?
Yes. Yeah. That's how I believe it should be, because if it's saying that up to 3 hours, it means that if you are getting a really tough question and you crack it through, I think you gain more points for that, and then your number of hours get reduced because they already know that you're good at this concept.
Oh, you mean to say the number of questions attempted also would get reduced?
Yeah, because it says 100
it is saying 100 to 150 questions. Yes, I see. Yeah. Okay, that's really nice. So would it also means to say on a hypothetical situation where I'm a mediocre person, so I might end up with all 150 questions?
Yes.
Okay, that's nice to know. Sure. Thank you so much.
Yeah. But I would say it's much better than sitting in an exam hall for 6 hours and writing 250 questions.
Yeah. Okay. But it was already onto the computer CAT mode, no? Not
yes,
CAT, not CBT.
CBT,
mode.
The CBT is there for 6 hours, but when I wrote it was
that is going to change now.
Yeah, that is going to change now.
Okay.
I mean, like, you have information more on the ISC squared side. You can, if you have any questions, probably you can go there and get your answers for that.
I will do that. Thank you so much.
Great.
Thanks for the question, Sesha Prakash. To everyone as well, any which ways the entire webinar is recorded, and we're going to upload this on YouTube. So Sesha Prakash will be happy. You can actually go through the entire 1 hour presentation that Kishore has given, which means you've actually not missed anything. Great. So thanks so much
nice.
again.
Thank you. Great.
Great. Thanks so much again, Kishore, and thank you everyone for joining in. And pretty shortly, we will upload this video so that everyone can benefit. And next Saturday, 2nd December, we're going to start the course. Anyone interested, please get in touch. The email and the phone numbers are there on the chat. Thanks so much again from CISSP. We are signing off. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, everyone.